What if the person you were sworn to save was the same person who destroyed your family? What if God placed that test right in your hands, and your next decision would echo through eternity? Good evening, and welcome back to Wisdom by the Fireside. In today's live story, we follow a woman whose path was carved by tragedy, yet redirected by faith. Tonight, you'll hear how a nurse named Angela was faced with a choice most of us would never want to make: heal the man who caused her brother's death, or let bitterness win. And as you'll see, what she discovered in that hospital room would change her life forever. It all began in the late 1990s, on a quiet street just outside Indianapolis, Indiana. Angela was a teenager then, full of life and protective of her younger brother, Michael. He was 17, playful and reckless, the kind of boy who could light up the dullest evening with his laughter. But that laughter ended one night with the screech of tires and the shattering of glass. Michael was killed instantly in a car accident. The driver, a man named Thomas, had been drinking. He was in his 20s, careless, and in that one moment of recklessness, he stole a brother, a son, a heartbeat from Angela's home. The police lights painted the dark street blue and red that night. But all Angela remembered was the way her mother fell to her knees, screaming Michael's name. Her father stood silent, broken. And Angela? She clenched her fists and whispered to herself, "I'll never forgive him. Never." Years passed. Grief etched its scars into the family. Her parents aged faster, her father grew withdrawn, and her mother filled the house with silence. Angela, though, turned her pain into purpose. She pursued nursing, almost as if saving lives could make up for the one she'd lost. People often asked her why she chose that path, and she always answered with something polite, something practical. But deep down, it was Michael. She wanted to be at the bedside of others, so no sister would have to feel what she did. By 2010, Angela was working in the trauma unit of a large hospital in Indianapolis. It was demanding work, long shifts, endless emergencies, lives hanging in the balance. But she was good at it. She had a calming presence, steady hands, and an instinct for compassion that came from her own suffering. She never thought much about Thomas anymore. He had gone to prison, served his sentence, and as far as she was concerned, he had disappeared from her story. Or so she thought. One night in 2018, Angela was called to a new patient, admitted from the ER, a middle-aged man in critical condition following a heart attack. His face was pale, his breathing shallow. She pulled the chart from the end of the bed, glanced at the name, and froze. Thomas. For a moment, the room spun. The chart trembled in her hands. It couldn't be, yet it was. The same Thomas who had ended Michael's life now lay before her, helpless, clinging to his own. Angela's heart pounded. Rage she hadn't felt in decades surged back. She remembered the police station, the funeral, the nights of crying herself to sleep. And now God had placed him here, in her care. What would you have done? Would you have turned away? Would you have let fate run its course? Angela stood there staring at him, the old vow ringing in her ears. I'll never forgive him. But something deeper stirred in her soul, a whisper she couldn't ignore. This is your test. This is your chance. She closed her eyes, tears threatening to fall, and silently prayed, "Lord, give me strength. Show me what you want from me now." When she opened her eyes, Thomas was gasping, weak. A man who had once looked untouchable now looked so fragile. Angela knew then. She couldn't let hatred decide. She was a nurse, sworn to heal. And maybe, just maybe, this was God's way of asking her to release the burden she had carried for so long. She tightened her grip on the chart, steadied her breath, and stepped to his side. "Thomas," she whispered softly, though he barely stirred, "you're going to be okay. We'll take care of you." He didn't recognize her. To him, she was just another nurse. But to Angela, this moment was the collision of two lives, forever linked by tragedy. Little did she know, choosing compassion that night would set in motion a chain of events she never could have imagined. Because sometimes, forgiveness doesn't just heal the past, it reshapes the future. But what Angela discovered in the weeks that followed would leave her questioning everything she thought she knew about justice, mercy, and fate itself. The next morning, Angela returned to the hospital with little sleep. She had spent the night replaying the past, Michael's face flashing in her mind, the sound of that phone call that had shattered their family. Now, as she pushed through the double doors of the cardiac wing, her heart tightened. She told herself she could keep it professional, detached. After all, that was her duty. But deep inside, she knew God had placed her here for a reason far greater than medicine. She stopped at the foot of Thomas's bed. He was awake this time, his eyes searching the ceiling, unfocused, dazed. Years had aged him. Gray threaded through his hair, wrinkles deepened by regret or maybe hard living. His gaze shifted slowly until it landed on Angela. For a brief second, she thought he might recognize her. But his face showed no sign of memory. To him, she was a stranger. "Good morning," she said, her voice steady but softer than usual. "I'm Angela. I'll be one of the nurses looking after you." He blinked, swallowing, his voice hoarse. "Angela, thank you." The words were simple, but they cut deep. Thank you. Did he even know who she was? Did he remember that long ago night? Angela forced herself to focus on the monitors, adjusting his IV line, checking his vitals. Yet every movement felt heavy. Every glance toward his face a tug of war between anger and mercy. Later that day, she found herself in the break room, staring into a lukewarm cup of coffee. Her colleague, Nina, slid into the seat across from her. "You look pale," Nina said. "Rough shift?" Angela hesitated. She wanted to share, but how could she? "It's just this patient. He reminds me of someone from my past." Nina nodded knowingly. "It happens. Sometimes God puts people in our path for a reason." The words echoed in Angela's mind all afternoon. For a reason. That evening she pulled Thomas's chart again. His prognosis wasn't good: blocked arteries, years of neglect, a body worn down by choices. If he survived the week, it would be by grace. When she entered his room later, she found him more alert. He tried to smile, but the effort seemed to pain him. "Angela," he said slowly, "you've been kind. I don't deserve it." The confession startled her. "Why would you say that?" she asked carefully. He stared past her, his voice cracking. "Because I've done things, stupid things. Hurt people. There's not a day I don't think about it." Angela's chest tightened. Was he talking about Michael? Did he even remember? She wanted to shout, "You destroyed my family." But her lips stayed closed, trembling. Instead, she whispered, "We've all made mistakes, Thomas. Some bigger than others. But you're here now. Maybe that means you have another chance." His eyes glistened. "Do you believe in that? Another chance?" Her throat constricted. How could she answer? She thought of the Bible her mother used to read at night after Michael died, verses about mercy she had dismissed in her grief. Now they came back, uninvited. "Forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us." "Yes," she finally said, almost surprising herself. "I believe in second chances." He closed his eyes, exhaling as if her words had lifted a weight from his chest. But Angela couldn't escape the turmoil inside her. That night, driving home down the dark stretch of highway, she wrestled with questions. Was this really forgiveness? Or just duty? Could she ever look Thomas in the eye and release him from the chains of his past? Or was she only pretending, hiding her anger under the mask of professionalism? She pulled over for a moment, shutting off the engine. The silence of the night pressed in. Tears slid down her cheeks. "God," she whispered into the darkness, "I don't know if I can do this. I don't know if I can forgive him. But if this is what you want from me, then help me. Please, help me." The wind rustled through the trees, almost like a response. And though no voice spoke, Angela felt the faintest peace settle into her chest, a whisper of strength she hadn't known she still had. The next days blurred into a rhythm of care, medication, monitoring, quiet conversations. Slowly, Thomas began to open up. He spoke of wasted years, of drinking, of mistakes that left scars he couldn't erase. But he never named Michael. He never said her brother's name, and every time he admitted his regret, Angela's heart clenched tighter. Did she dare tell him who she was? Did she dare hold a mirror to his past? One evening, as she adjusted his oxygen tube, Thomas reached out, his trembling hand brushing her arm. "You remind me of someone," he whispered. Angela froze. "Who?" He closed his eyes. "A girl. From years ago. Her brother died because of me. I never got to say, I'm sorry." The room went still. The monitors beeped steadily. The fluorescent light hummed above, but Angela heard nothing but the pounding of her own heart. The truth was out. He remembered. He carried it still. And now the question wasn't whether Angela could forgive him silently. It was whether she could look into his eyes, reveal who she was, and forgive him face to face. Angela's knees nearly buckled as Thomas's words echoed in the room. A girl. Her brother died because of me. The weight of them pressed against her chest, choking her. For 2 decades, she had dreamed of this moment. The man who killed Michael acknowledging what he had done. But never like this. Never while he lay frail, dependent on her hands to keep him alive. She swallowed hard, steadying herself. You remember?" she whispered. Thomas nodded weakly, his eyes glistening. "I remember everything." His name was Michael. The sound of her brother's name spoken by the man who took him. It cut like glass. She almost pulled away, but something held her in place. Thomas's voice cracked. "I was drunk. I thought I could drive. I thought I was invincible. And in one night, I destroyed a family. I never stopped seeing his face, or the headlines, or the sister who looked at me like I was a monster." Angela's breath caught. That sister was her. Her heart screamed to tell him, "It was me. I am that girl. I am the sister." But fear stopped her. What if he broke under the weight of the truth? What if he begged for forgiveness she wasn't ready to give? What if her mask of control shattered in this sterile room? Instead, she murmured, "Do you believe God can forgive you?" Thomas's lips trembled. "I pray he can. But people? People don't forgive something like that." His gaze dropped, shame heavy on his shoulders. Angela turned away, blinking back tears. She wanted to shout, "I'm right here. I am the one who has to forgive." But she didn't. Not yet. That night at home, she sat at her kitchen table with her Bible unopened before her. Her mother's handwriting was on the first page. "Angela, when it hurts too much, remember this. Vengeance is mine, says the Lord." She pressed her forehead to the pages and wept. All these years, she had carried vengeance in her heart, like a hidden ember still burning. And now, God had set before her the man she hated most. Was this coincidence or divine design? The next day at work, she entered Thomas's room to find him more restless than usual. He looked up, his eyes pleading. "Angela, will you sit with me a moment?" She hesitated, then pulled a chair beside him. "I've never told anyone," he said quietly. "Not my parents, not the few friends I had left. I buried it, but it buried me back. That night ruined me as much as it ruined them. I've been running ever since. The bottle, the loneliness. It was all punishment I thought I deserved." Angela's hands trembled in her lap. She couldn't hold back anymore. The truth burned inside her like fire. "Thomas," she said, her voice shaking, "there's something you need to know." His eyes flickered with fear. "What is it?" She took a deep breath. "The girl you keep remembering, the sister, it's me. I'm Angela. I was Michael's sister." The silence that followed was deafening. The monitors beeped, the air conditioner hummed, but between them hung a silence so heavy it felt eternal. Thomas's face went pale. His eyes widened in disbelief, then horror. "No," he whispered. "No, it can't be." "It is," Angela said, tears streaming freely now. "I was there. I saw you that night. I swore I'd never forgive you." He turned his face away, broken sobs shaking his fragile chest. Oh God, no. I don't deserve to live. Not if you're the one keeping me alive." Angela's throat tightened. This was the moment. She could have left him in despair, let him choke on the guilt, but she remembered her prayer under the stars. Lord, help me forgive. She reached out, her hand trembling as it touched his. Thomas, for years I carried hate, but it's killing me more than it's killing you. I don't know if I can forget what you did, but I want to forgive. I want to believe that God can take even this and make it something new. Thomas wept openly, clutching her hand like a drowning man to a lifeline. You forgive me? After what I did? Angela's tears fell onto their joined hands. I'm trying. I want to. Because holding on to hate won't bring Michael back. But maybe letting it go will bring me peace. The man who had once been her greatest enemy now lay before her, undone by mercy. And yet, deep in her heart, Angela wondered, was she strong enough to carry this forgiveness to the end? Or would bitterness creep back the moment she let go of his hand? The days ahead would test her more than she ever imagined. Because what happened next in Thomas's life would turn her fragile forgiveness into a living, breathing miracle neither of them could have foreseen. Angela left Thomas's room that night with her soul trembling. The confession had escaped her lips like a storm breaking loose, and now there was no undoing it. She had revealed herself, the sister of the boy whose death haunted his every breath. Driving home through the quiet streets of Indianapolis, she kept replaying the look on his face. Horror, guilt, collapse. She had seen many kinds of pain in her career, but nothing compared to watching a man crumble under the weight of his own remorse. At a red light, she pressed her hands against the steering wheel and whispered, God, why me? Why now? You could have let anyone else be his nurse, but you put me here. What am I supposed to do with this? The light turned green, but her question lingered. The following morning, she dreaded her shift. Part of her wanted to walk in and request a transfer, to tell her supervisor she couldn't care for him anymore. But another voice inside whispered, Stay! This is not finished. When she entered Thomas's room, he looked different. His eyes avoided hers, his body stiff, as if afraid even to breathe in her presence. You came back, he muttered, his voice cracked from a night of tears. Angela nodded. I'm your nurse, Thomas. I don't run away from my patients. His lips quivered. But how can you even stand to look at me? Knowing what I did, knowing it was your brother. Her throat tightened, but she forced herself to meet his gaze. Because if God put me here, then he must think I can. Maybe he wants something bigger out of this than either of us can see. His chest rose and fell uneven. Angela, I prayed for years that I could tell someone I was sorry. I just never thought it would be you. She stayed silent, the weight of his words pressing on her. That afternoon, Angela slipped into the hospital chapel during her break. It was empty, lit only by stained glass, glowing from the sun outside. She sat in the back pew, clasping her hands so tightly they hurt. Lord, she whispered, you say we must forgive as you forgive us. But this isn't just a wound, it's my whole life. I can't erase the empty chair at my parents' table. I can't erase the years of grief. How do I forgive something that big? She closed her eyes, and in the silence, verses she had long buried rose to the surface. Forgive 70 times 7. Bless those who curse you. Pray for those who mistreat you. Her tears fell onto the wood of the pew. She didn't hear God's voice, but she felt his presence, steady and unshakable. And in that stillness, she realized forgiveness wasn't about erasing the past. It was about releasing the chains that bound her to it. When she returned to Thomas, she found him awake, staring at the ceiling. Without thinking, she pulled the chair closer. Thomas, she said softly, you need to know something. Forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. It doesn't mean what happened wasn't terrible. But it does mean I won't let hate rule my life anymore. His eyes filled with tears. You're giving me more mercy than I deserve. Angela shook her head. It's not me. It's God working through me. If it were just me, I'd still be wishing you gone. A long silence settled between them, broken only by the beeping monitor. For the first time, though, the silence felt less heavy. Like a door had cracked open, letting in the smallest ray of light. In the days that followed, something unexpected happened. Thomas began to improve. His vitals stabilized, his color returned, and the doctors spoke of possibilities rather than endings. Angela couldn't deny the shift. She had seen patients cling to life before, but this felt different. It was as if her act of mercy had breathed hope into him. She found herself staying longer by his bedside, not out of duty, but out of a strange, unspoken bond. One evening, as she adjusted his IV, he whispered, "Angela, can I ask you something?" She nodded. "If Michael were here, do you think he'd hate me? Or do you think he'd forgive me too?" Her heart clenched. She thought of her brother's mischievous smile, his easy laughter. Michael had been softer than her, more forgiving even when he was wronged. "I think," she said carefully, "Michael would want me to let go of the anger. And maybe he'd want you to find peace too." Thomas's lips trembled. "Then maybe I'll see him one day. If God lets me." Angela felt her throat close with emotion. She didn't know the mysteries of eternity, but she knew one thing. Something sacred was happening in this small hospital room. Still, a part of her feared. Forgiveness was fragile. What if it shattered? What if Thomas relapsed, returned to drinking, or wasted this second chance? Would her mercy be wasted too? That night, as she walked out of the hospital under a sky dotted with stars, a question burned in her chest. Was forgiveness really for Thomas? Or was it for her own soul? She didn't know then that the answer would unfold in a way that would change not just her heart, but her entire family's future. Angela knew that her forgiveness wasn't complete until her family was part of it. Her parents had carried Michael's death like a stone on their backs for decades. They rarely spoke of him now, not because the pain had faded, but because it had become too heavy to touch. One Sunday afternoon, Angela drove out to her parents' modest home on the edge of town. The house felt frozen in time. Her mother's porcelain figurines still lined the shelves. Her father's recliner sat in its familiar dent, and a framed photo of Michael, smiling in his high school jersey, stared down from the mantel. Her mother greeted her warmly, but Angela could see the tiredness behind her eyes. Her father nodded, retreating quickly to his chair, as though conversation might unravel him. Over dinner, Angela hesitated, twisting her fork in silence. Finally, she said, "There's something I need to tell you both. It's about Michael." Her mother's hand froze midair, clutching a napkin. Her father's eyes flicked up, guarded. Angela took a deep breath. "I've been caring for a patient. His name is Thomas." The silence was deafening. Her father's jaw tightened. Her mother's lips parted in disbelief. Angela's voice trembled. "Yes, that Thomas. The one who—" She didn't finish. She didn't have to. Her father slammed his fork down, his voice shaking. "Why are you saying his name in this house?" Her mother's eyes filled with tears. "Angela, no. Please tell me you're not—" "I am," Angela interrupted gently. "He's in my care, and he knows who I am. He remembers Michael. He's drowning in guilt, and I've started to forgive him." Her father's face darkened. "Forgive? Forgive the man who destroyed our son?" Angela's heart pounded. "Dad, I thought the same for years. I hated him. But carrying that hate, what has it done for us? Has it brought Michael back? Has it given us peace?" Her mother wept into her napkin, torn between grief and disbelief. "Angela, how could God ask this of us?" Angela reached across the table, her voice breaking. "Because forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. It means we stop letting hate rule our lives. Maybe this is how God is healing us. Through me, through this moment." Her father shook his head silent, his eyes burning with pain. Her mother whispered a prayer under her breath. That night, Angela left their house, heavy with doubt. Was she betraying Michael's memory by forgiving Thomas? Or was she finally honoring it? Back at the hospital, Thomas noticed the change in her demeanor. "You told them," he whispered. Angela nodded. "They're struggling. They've lived in pain for too long." Thomas lowered his eyes. "I don't blame them. If I were them, I'd hate me too." Angela studied him. His fragility was no longer just physical, it was soul deep. Thomas, what are you going to do with this chance? If you live through this, what will you make of it? His eyes glistened. I don't know, but I don't want to waste it. I want to do something that matters. Maybe help someone else. Her heart clenched at the irony. Could the man who once destroyed her world now be an instrument of healing? That night, as Angela walked through the hospital corridor, she overheard a patient in another room crying out in pain. She rushed in to help, calming the young man until he settled. But as she worked, she thought of Thomas's words. I want to do something that matters. A thought flickered in her mind. What if Thomas's life wasn't just spared for himself, but for her family too? The next week, she returned to her parents' home. This time, she brought something with her. Thomas's letter. He had written it with trembling hands, pouring out his confession, his sorrow, his plea for mercy. Angela had watched him write it, his tears staining the paper. Now she placed it on her parents' kitchen table. Her father refused to touch it at first. Her mother picked it up with shaking hands and began to read aloud. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't deserve it, but please know that your son has never left my thoughts. I took his life, but he gave me one too. The chance to live with the weight of what I'd done. If God allows me more time, I promise it won't be wasted. I will honor his name with what's left of mine. Her mother broke down in tears. Her father's face softened, though his eyes stayed wet and distant. He whispered, he remembered Michael after all this time. Angela reached for his hand. Dad, maybe forgiveness isn't about him. Maybe it's about freeing us. Her father didn't answer, but for the first time in years, Angela saw his shoulders ease, just slightly, as though the weight had shifted, if only an inch. Angela couldn't sleep after leaving her parents' house that evening. The image of her father holding back tears, her mother's hands trembling as she clutched Thomas's letter, it replayed over and over. Something had cracked in the silence of that kitchen. For the first time since Michael's death, her parents had looked less like prisoners of grief and more like people yearning for release. But forgiveness was not a door you could fling open all at once. It was more like a window, creaking slowly as light fought its way through the years of dust. At the hospital the next day, Thomas's strength was returning. His color improved, and though he still tired easily, he no longer seemed to be teetering at death's edge. Angela entered his room to find him gazing out the window, sunlight spilling across his frail frame. You look better, she said with a gentle smile. He nodded. I feel like I've been given time I don't deserve. He paused, then added, Did your parents read the letter? Angela hesitated, pulling the chair close. They did. It broke something open in them. They're still hurting, but they heard you. And that's more than I ever thought possible. Tears welled in Thomas's eyes. I've prayed every night for years that I could tell them I was sorry. I never thought God would actually let it happen. Angela tilted her head, studying him. Do you really believe God forgave you? He swallowed hard. I believe he can. I just don't know if I've ever let him. Maybe I've been too afraid to ask. Angela leaned forward, her voice steady. Then maybe that's why you're still here. Maybe this isn't just about surviving a heart attack. Maybe it's about you finally making peace with God. Thomas closed his eyes, whispering through tears, Lord, I don't deserve it, but if you can forgive me, please do. For Angela, watching him pray was both painful and strangely healing. She thought of Michael, her little brother with the mischievous grin, and wondered if he was somehow part of this moment, if heaven leaned close when mercy was spoken. Later that week, the doctors began talking about Thomas's discharge. He wasn't out of danger, but his recovery was strong enough to continue outside the hospital. Angela felt a knot of both relief and dread. His departure meant their daily connection would end, but maybe it also meant the story wasn't finished. On his last day, as she helped him prepare, Thomas reached for her hand. Angela, I don't know how to thank you. You gave me more than care. You gave me a chance to face the truth. Her throat tightened. Don't waste it, Thomas. If you walk out of here, make it count. Live in a way that honors Michael, not destroys his memory. He nodded firmly, his eyes glistening. I will. I don't know how yet, but I will. That evening, Angela returned home to find her mother waiting on the porch. She looked tired, but her expression was softer than Angela had seen in years. Your father read the letter again, her mother said quietly. He sat in Michael's room with it. He hasn't gone in there in years. Angela's heart ached. And? Her mother's eyes filled. He cried, Angela. He cried like the night we lost Michael. But afterward, he said something I never thought I'd hear. He said, maybe it's time to let go. Angela felt her knees weaken. Mom! Her mother took her hands. Your father isn't ready to forgive. Not yet. But the hate, it's starting to crack. And I think that's because of you. Because you chose mercy. Angela wept quietly, holding her mother close. Days turned into weeks. Thomas moved into a modest apartment downtown, living quietly, attending recovery meetings, even showing up at a local church. Angela would hear of him through mutual acquaintances at the hospital. And every time she did, she wondered, was this truly the beginning of redemption, or just a fragile attempt that could crumble at any moment? One evening, her phone buzzed. It was a number she didn't recognize. She hesitated, then answered. Angela? The voice was rough but familiar. It's Thomas. Her chest tightened. Thomas? How did you get my number? I asked one of the hospital staff. I'm sorry if that was wrong, but I had to tell you something. I started volunteering at the community center, helping teens, teaching them about the dangers of drinking and driving. Angela, I tell them about Michael, about you, about what I did. Not to excuse it, but to warn them. Angela sat down heavily, her eyes stinging with tears. I don't know if this is enough, he continued, but I promised you I wouldn't waste this chance. Maybe this is how I can honor him. Angela's voice trembled. Thomas, that's more than I could have asked. Thank you. He paused, his voice breaking. No, thank you. For saving me when you had every reason not to. As she hung up the phone, Angela sat in silence, overwhelmed. She realized something profound. Forgiveness wasn't just freeing her. It was reshaping Thomas's future, her parents' grief, and perhaps even the lives of kids who might be spared the same tragedy. But the greatest test was still ahead, because while she had forgiven with words, the moment was coming when she and her parents would have to stand face to face with the man who had broken their world. And that encounter would decide if mercy was just a whisper in a hospital room, or a fire that could burn away decades of pain. Angela had not intended to suggest it. The idea had slipped out one evening, spoken in a quiet voice at her parents' kitchen table, as her father slowly folded Thomas's letter again and again, until the paper was creased like old skin. Maybe, Angela whispered, you should meet him. The words hung in the air, sharp as broken glass. Her father's eyes darkened. Meet him? The man who... His voice cracked, unable to finish. Her mother's hands trembled as she placed her teacup down. Angela, that would be unbearable. Angela swallowed hard. It might be unbearable. But maybe it's also the only way through. Letters and whispers can only carry us so far. Maybe looking him in the eyes is the last step toward healing. Her father said nothing more, but Angela saw the storm in his silence. That night she prayed longer than usual. God, if this is too much, stop me. If this is right, open the way. The following week, she spoke with Thomas. They met in a small coffee shop near the hospital, his hands wrapped around a cup he hardly touched. They know about you, Angela said quietly. They read your letter. And I think it's time for you to meet them. Thomas's face drained of color. Angela, no, they'll hate me. They should hate me. They do, Angela admitted. But they also carry that hate like a sickness. And maybe meeting you is the medicine, even if it hurts. He shook his head, tears welling. I don't deserve to breathe the same air as them. But if you think it could help, I'll do it. For Michael. For them. Not for me. The meeting was set for a Saturday afternoon. Angela chose a neutral place, a quiet church hall where sunlight poured through stained glass windows, softening the edges of every shadow. Her parents arrived first, sitting side by side but not touching. Her father's jaw was clenched, his fists tight in his lap. Her mother clutched a handkerchief like it was her lifeline. When Thomas entered, the room went still. He looked smaller than Angela remembered, hunched by the weight of years and shame. His eyes flicked to her parents, then quickly down to the floor. Angela broke the silence. "Mom, Dad, this is Thomas." Her father's nostrils flared, his breathing sharp. Her mother let out a soft sob. Thomas swallowed, his voice shaking. "Mr. and Mrs. Reynolds, I don't deserve to be standing here, but I need to tell you face to face. I'm sorry for what I did, for Michael, for the years you've suffered. There's not a night I don't see his face. I know my words can't change anything, but I had to say them." Her mother pressed the handkerchief to her mouth, tears spilling freely. Her father's face was stone, but his eyes glistened. "You think words can fix this?" her father snapped, his voice low but trembling. "You think sorry erases the empty chair at our table? The birthdays we never celebrated? The son we buried?" Thomas's shoulders sagged. "No, nothing can erase it. I know that. I hoped you might believe that I'm not the same man I was. That I've spent every day since trying to carry the weight of what I did." Silence swallowed the room. Angela's heart raced, torn between wanting to protect her parents and knowing this moment had to unfold on its own. Her mother spoke first, her voice cracking. "I have hated you for so long. I thought forgiving you would be betraying Michael. But maybe holding on has only chained me to the grave." Her father turned sharply to her, shocked. She met his gaze through tears. "I can't carry this anymore. I want to forgive." Her father's chest heaved, his fists tightening. He looked at Thomas, then at Angela, then back at the floor. His lips trembled. Finally, through clenched teeth, he whispered, "I can't forgive." "Not yet." The words cut Angela, but they were honest. Thomas lowered his head. "Then I'll accept your hate. I deserve it. But thank you for hearing me." Angela reached for her father's hand, her voice trembling. "Dad, forgiveness isn't about him. It's about us. Do you want Michael's memory to live in hate or in mercy?" Her father's shoulders shook. He pressed his palm to his eyes, silent sobs escaping for the first time in decades. Angela's mother leaned into him, her tears mingling with his. In that church hall, 3 broken souls sat with the man who had caused their pain. And though no full forgiveness was spoken, something shifted. A seed planted, a crack in the stone. When Thomas left, Angela's mother whispered, "He looked so human. I always pictured a monster, but he's just broken." Her father didn't answer. But as they walked out into the sunlight, Angela noticed his steps were slower, less heavy, as though the ground no longer pulled him under with every stride. The road to forgiveness wasn't over, but for the first time, it had truly begun. The drive home from the church hall was silent. Angela sat in the back seat of her parents' car, watching the city blur by through the window. Her mother clutched her handkerchief like it was all that kept her together, while her father gripped the steering wheel so tightly his knuckles turned white. Angela wanted to say something, anything to ease the tension, but she knew better. Words spoken too soon could splinter fragile ground. Sometimes silence was the only language grief understood. When they pulled into the driveway, her father finally spoke. "Don't ask me to forgive him again, Angela. Not now." His voice was raw, but softer than she expected. "I won't," Angela said quietly. "Not until you're ready." Her mother glanced at her, eyes swollen from crying. "But maybe, one day." Angela nodded, holding on to that sliver of hope. Over the next weeks, life settled into a new rhythm. Angela continued her shifts at the hospital, but she noticed a change in herself. She was lighter, as if speaking the truth to Thomas and bringing her parents face to face with him had loosened invisible chains she hadn't realized were binding her. Meanwhile, Thomas kept in touch. Not often, just enough to let Angela know he was trying. He called once to say he'd gone back to church, another time to share that he'd started volunteering weekly at the youth center. His voice always carried a mixture of humility and surprise, as if he couldn't believe he was still alive, still given a chance to do something good. One evening, Angela decided to see for herself. She drove to the community center downtown, a modest brick building with peeling paint, but a lively hum of voices inside. Through the window of the multipurpose room, she spotted Thomas sitting in a circle of teenagers. He looked out of place at first, an older man among restless youth. But as he spoke, they leaned in, listening. Angela edged closer, catching fragments of his words. "I thought I could handle a few drinks. I thought nothing bad would happen. But in one night, I ruined lives. I'll never take that back. But I can warn you, don't make the same mistake." The teens nodded, some wide-eyed, others shifting uncomfortably. For many, it was the first time someone had spoken to them with such raw honesty. Angela felt her throat tighten. Here was the man who had once destroyed her family, now using his brokenness to shield others from the same fate. Could this be what redemption looked like? After the session ended, Thomas spotted her in the doorway. His eyes widened in surprise, then softened with gratitude. "You came," Angela nodded. "I wanted to see for myself." He lowered his gaze. "And?" She hesitated, then smiled faintly. "I think Michael would have been proud of this. Of you, standing here, turning your mistake into a warning for others." His eyes filled with tears. "That means more than anything you could have said." Back at home, Angela shared the visit with her mother. Her mother listened quietly, her eyes misting over. "Maybe God really is turning ashes into something new," she whispered. Her father, however, remained guarded. He listened but said nothing, his face unreadable. Yet Angela noticed that he no longer snapped at the mention of Thomas's name. His silence had shifted from rage to reflection. One Sunday, he surprised them both. After church, as they sat at the kitchen table, he spoke without looking up. "If that man keeps doing what he's doing, maybe one day I'll sit with him again." Angela's chest swelled with quiet hope. Weeks later, an unexpected phone call shook them. It was Thomas's voice, weak and strained. "Angela, I need to tell you something. The doctors found more damage in my heart. I might not have long." Angela's stomach dropped. "Thomas!" "I'm not afraid," he interrupted softly. "I've been given more mercy than I deserved. But before it's over, I want to do something for your family. Something that shows Michael's life wasn't wasted because of me." Angela's pulse quickened. "What do you mean?" He hesitated. "I'll explain soon. Just please bring your parents when the time is right. I want them to hear it too." Angela hung up the phone with trembling hands. She had no idea what he was planning, but she knew this. God was not done weaving their story together. What Thomas revealed in the days ahead would stun her family, opening a door none of them had imagined possible. Angela couldn't shake the tension in her chest after Thomas's call. His voice had been so frail, his words so final. "I want to do something for your family." What could he possibly mean? What could a man like Thomas offer that would mend decades of loss? A few days later, he asked her to meet him at his small apartment. Her parents agreed to come, though her father's reluctance was written all over his face. Angela drove them there in silence, the air heavy with unspoken fears. Thomas greeted them at the door, thinner than before, his skin pale, but his eyes strangely resolute. He motioned them inside. The apartment was humble. Second-hand furniture, a faded rug, a few photographs of sunsets taped to the wall. "Thank you for coming," Thomas said, his voice trembling but determined. "I know this isn't easy, but I couldn't leave this world without saying it in person." Angela's mother dabbed her eyes with a tissue. Her father crossed his arms, his posture stiff, but he stayed. That alone felt like a miracle. Thomas gestured for them to sit. He remained standing, holding a folder close to his chest. "For years, I carried guilt like a curse. I thought my life was over the night I killed Michael, and maybe it should have been. But then Angela saved me. Physically, yes, but more than that. She gave me the chance to face my sin instead of running from it." He opened the folder and pulled out a stack of papers. His hand shook as he handed them to Angela's father. "This is my will. What little I have, savings, insurance, the rest, it's not much. But I want it to go toward a scholarship. In Michael's name, for kids who want to study medicine or nursing or anything that saves lives. Angela's breath caught. Her mother covered her mouth with her hand, tears streaming down her cheeks. Her father stared at the papers, silent. Thomas's voice cracked. I know I can't give you your son back, but maybe this way his name will live on. Maybe kids who never knew him will carry him with them when they save others. The room was thick with emotion. Angela's father finally looked up, his eyes wet, his voice breaking. Why would you do this? Thomas's lips trembled. Because it's the only way I know to honor him. I took his life. Let me give life in his name. Angela's mother sobbed openly now, clutching her husband's arm. Angela felt her own tears fall hot and fast. She had never imagined that the man she once hated could bring such a gift. Her father's hands shook as he placed the papers back on the table. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then, in a voice hoarse with years of swallowed grief, he said, Thomas, I don't know if I can ever forgive you completely. But tonight, I don't hate you. The words broke something loose. Thomas bowed his head, his shoulders shaking with sobs. That's more than I ever dreamed to hear. Angela reached across the table, her hand covering her father's. Her mother whispered through her tears, Michael's name will live on. And maybe that's what God wanted all along. For the first time in decades, their family, broken, scarred, and still healing, sat in a room with the man who had torn them apart, and instead of bitterness, something holy hovered there. Mercy. That night, driving her parents home, Angela stared out at the quiet streets, thinking of the years lost to anger. What would life have been like if forgiveness had come sooner? But maybe it hadn't been possible until now. Maybe God had waited for this moment, for their family, for Thomas, for everyone touched by Michael's story. She thought of the teenagers Thomas was mentoring, the scholarship that would bear her brother's name, the quiet shift in her father's heart. None of it erased the past, but it transformed it. Angela whispered a prayer into the darkness. Lord, thank you for turning tragedy into testimony, for teaching me that forgiveness isn't weakness. It's the only way to live again. And though she didn't hear a voice, she felt the answer deep inside, the peace that comes only when hate finally lets go. What Angela didn't know yet was that the scholarship would grow into something far larger than Thomas had ever dreamed. A ripple of mercy that would spread far beyond their small circle, touching lives they would never even meet. But for now, in that fragile moment, it was enough. The weeks after Thomas revealed his plan for Michael's scholarship felt strangely surreal. Angela's parents, though still carrying grief, spoke of Michael in a new way. Her mother even began to reminisce, telling stories Angela hadn't heard in years, laughing through her tears about his pranks and his habit of leaving socks all over the house. Her father, though quieter, seemed lighter, as though something had been lifted off his chest. But while Angela's family healed, Thomas's health began to falter. His heart, weakened by years of abuse, struggled to keep up. He was in and out of the hospital, each visit reminding Angela that his time was running short. One evening, she entered his room to find him pale and exhausted, his chest rising shallowly with each breath. He managed a faint smile. Angela, you always come. She sat down beside him. Of course I do. He studied her face for a moment. Do you think God really forgave me? Not just you, not just your family, but him? Angela's throat tightened. She thought of all the nights she had prayed the same question about her own heart. Thomas, God's forgiveness isn't about what we deserve. None of us deserve it. It's about his grace. And I believe he gave you this time, this chance, to make peace with him. That's proof enough. Tears filled his eyes. Then maybe I can go in peace when it's time. Angela reached for his hand, holding it gently. You won't go alone. Michael's already there. And I believe God will show mercy greater than you can imagine. For a moment, Thomas closed his eyes, a fragile calm settling over him. In the days that followed, word of the scholarship spread through their community. Local newspapers picked up the story. A man once convicted of taking a young life, now dedicating his final years to honoring that life. The headline read, "From Tragedy to Mercy, a Legacy of Forgiveness." Angela watched as her father clipped the article and placed it on the mantel beside Michael's photo. It was the first time in decades that something new had been added there. Not a relic of grief, but a seed of hope. One Sunday afternoon, Angela and her parents visited Thomas at the hospital. He was weaker than ever, his breath shallow, but his eyes lit up when he saw them. "I wanted to see you all together," he whispered. Angela's mother leaned close. "Thomas, we read about the scholarship. People are talking about Michael again. But not with sadness, with honor. That means more to us than you'll ever know." Her father stepped forward, his voice breaking. "Thomas, I don't know if I can ever say the word forgive, but I don't hate you anymore. And I pray God welcomes you home." Thomas's lips trembled as tears streamed down his face. That's more than I ever hoped for." Angela squeezed his hand, her own tears falling freely. "Rest, Thomas. You've done what you were meant to do." That night, as Angela sat at his bedside long after her parents had left, Thomas whispered something that would stay with her forever. "You know, Angela, people think forgiveness is about the other person, but it saved me, and it saved you. And maybe it'll save someone else, too. Don't ever doubt. God was in all of this." Those were some of his last words. Within days, Thomas's condition worsened. On a quiet morning in late autumn, with Angela by his side, he took his final breath. His hand relaxed in hers, his face softening with a peace she had never seen on him before. Angela sat there in the silence, tears falling, but her heart strangely still. She whispered a prayer over him. "Lord, receive him. And thank you for turning our pain into something sacred." The funeral was small but powerful. A handful of friends from his church, the teenagers he had mentored, a few staff from the hospital. Angela and her parents sat together in the front row, listening as people spoke of a man who had turned his last years into a testimony of redemption. When it was Angela's turn to speak, she stepped to the podium, her voice trembling. "Thomas was the man who took my brother's life. For years, I hated him. But God put me in his path again, not to punish him, but to heal both of us. Forgiveness doesn't erase the past, but it can transform it. And through that forgiveness, Thomas gave Michael's name back to the world, not as a tragedy, but as a legacy of life." The room was silent, many wiping tears. Angela stepped down, returning to her parents. For the first time in decades, her father wrapped his arm around her shoulders, pulling her close. In that embrace, Angela felt something she hadn't in years, her family whole again. Not because Michael was back, but because mercy had stitched together what grief had torn apart. The weeks after Thomas's passing were quiet, but not empty. Angela found herself replaying his final words again and again. "Forgiveness saved me, and it saved you." At first they sounded simple, but the more she thought about them, the more she realized he had been right. Mercy had not only set Thomas free, it had healed her own soul and cracked open her parents' hearts, too. The scholarship he left behind began as a modest fund. Just a few $1,000s, a gesture born from repentance. But when the local newspaper ran a follow-up article about Thomas's death and the scholarship in Michael's name, something unexpected happened. Donations started pouring in. Strangers from around Indiana, moved by the story of tragedy transformed into forgiveness, sent checks, online transfers, even handwritten letters with folded bills tucked inside. Parents wrote about losing children to drunk drivers and wanting to honor their memory. Survivors of accidents wrote about second chances. Within weeks, the small fund had tripled. Angela stood at the bank one morning staring at the account balance with tears in her eyes. "Michael," she whispered, "look what God is doing with your name." Her father joined her at the kitchen table later that night, reading the growing list of donors. His voice cracked as he said, "People are remembering him, Angela. Not for how he died, but for how he lives on." For the first time in decades, Angela saw pride soften the grief in her father's face. Months passed, and the scholarship was officially launched, the Michael Reynolds Memorial Scholarship for Future Healers. At the ceremony, Angela's mother clutched her hand as the first two recipients were announced, a young woman named Danielle, who dreamed of becoming a trauma nurse, and a young man named Ethan, who wanted to study cardiology. When Danielle stepped up to the podium, her voice trembled. "I never knew Michael, but because of him, I'll be able to chase this dream. And because of the man who carried such regret, I'll remember that mistakes don't have to define us forever." Angela's eyes blurred with tears. She glanced at her parents, both openly crying, their grief mingled now with pride. After the ceremony, a reporter asked Angela how it felt to see her brother's name honored this way. She paused, then said softly, "It feels like mercy has rewritten our story. We lost Michael, but through forgiveness, God gave us a legacy instead of only pain." The reporter nodded, visibly moved. The article that followed spread beyond Indianapolis, carried by national outlets who picked up the story. Soon, people from across the country were sending messages. Teachers who wanted to use the story in class, churches who preached about it in sermons, families who said it gave them courage to forgive. Angela realized something astonishing. Their private tragedy had become a public testimony. "Angela," he said quietly, "I was wrong to hold on so long. I thought hate kept me close to Michael, but I see now, it only kept me far from God. I don't know if I can say the word forgive with ease, but I believe, deep down, I already have." Angela's eyes filled with tears as she crossed the room and hugged him. For the first time since she was a teenager, she felt her father's embrace not as a shield against pain, but as an offering of peace. Her mother joined them, her voice breaking. Maybe Michael's greatest gift to us wasn't his life, but what God did through his death. As months turned into a year, the scholarship grew even more. Universities began to match donations, churches raised funds, and a national foundation offered to help expand it. By 2025, dozens of students carried Michael's name into hospitals, clinics, and classrooms across the country. Angela often received letters from them. One read, "Because of Michael, I'm studying to be a nurse. Because of Angela, I'm reminded to forgive. Because of Thomas, I know that even broken people can become instruments of grace." Every letter was a reminder. Mercy doesn't end with one act. It multiplies. One evening, Angela lit a fire in her living room, the crackle echoing memories of her childhood. Her parents sat nearby, the warmth softening their faces. She opened a scrapbook filled with clippings, letters, and photos from the scholarship events. As the flames flickered, she asked softly, "Do you think Michael knows?" Her mother smiled through her tears. "Oh yes, I believe he does, and I believe God wanted him to." Angela leaned back, watching the sparks rise into the chimney. For the first time in decades, the emptiness inside her was no longer hollow. It was filled, with memory, with mercy, with hope. And though she knew the pain of losing Michael would never vanish, she also knew something greater. God had written a new ending. The first spring after Thomas's passing, Angela noticed how different the world looked. The same streets she had driven for years now carried less weight. The same hospital halls she had walked in exhaustion now felt like sacred ground. Something had shifted inside her, and it wasn't just about Thomas or Michael. It was about her. For decades, she had carried grief like armor, protecting herself from more pain, but also from joy. Forgiveness had cracked that armor open, and through the cracks, light had poured in. At the hospital, colleagues began to notice the change. "Angela, you've always been a good nurse," one doctor told her, "but lately it's like you're glowing." She laughed it off, but inside she knew it was true. Mercy had rewoven her spirit. One evening after a long shift, she stopped at the community center where Thomas had once spoken to teens. A new group was meeting, and though she didn't plan to join, she found herself drawn in. A young girl named Samantha shared her story about losing her brother in a drunk driving crash. Her words trembled with the same grief Angela had once carried. Without thinking, Angela stepped forward. "I know that pain," she said gently. I lost my brother too. And for years, I hated the man who caused it. But I learned something. Holding on to hate doesn't heal. Forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting, but it frees your heart to live again." The girl's eyes filled with tears. "How did you do it?" Angela smiled faintly. "Not on my own. God gave me the strength, and He can give it to you too." The room fell quiet, and for a moment Angela realized she was now standing in Thomas's place, carrying forward the message he had begun. What had started with his repentance had become her testimony too. At home that night, Angela sat with her parents by the fire. Her mother flipped through letters from scholarship recipients, reading aloud their dreams of becoming doctors, nurses, and counselors. Her father listened, his hands folded, his face peaceful in a way she had never seen since Michael's death. "Angela," he said suddenly, "do you ever think about what forgiveness has done to us?" She looked at him surprised. "All the time." He nodded slowly. "For years, I thought forgiving Thomas would dishonor Michael. But I see now, it honors him more than anything else could have. If our boy's name is giving life to others, isn't that what we should remember?" Angela's eyes blurred with tears. "Yes, Dad. That's what we should remember." Her mother reached for both their hands. "Maybe that's why God didn't take the hate from us sooner. Maybe He was waiting until the right time so the story could touch more lives." Angela thought about it long after they went to bed. Could it be that even the timing of their forgiveness was divine? That God had waited until it would ripple farthest? The thought filled her with awe. In the months that followed, unexpected blessings began to unfold in Angela's personal life. For years, she had lived alone, pouring herself into work, keeping relationships at arm's length. But now, with her heart unburdened, she began opening to new connections. At a church gathering, she met David, a widowed father who volunteered with youth outreach. Their conversations stretched late into the evenings, their shared faith and wounds weaving a quiet bond. One night, David asked softly, "Angela, how do you still believe after everything you've been through?" She hesitated, then answered, "Because I've seen God turn the worst thing in my life into something good. If He can do that, what can't He do?" David smiled gently. "That's the kind of faith I want to walk beside." For the first time in decades, Angela felt the stirrings of hope for a future that wasn't defined by loss. Still, she often returned to Michael's grave, sitting quietly, talking to him as if he were near. "Michael," she whispered one evening, "you're still part of everything. Thomas honored you. Mom and Dad are healing. And me? I think I'm finally living again. Maybe that's the gift you left us, that even in death, your life could point us to grace." The wind rustled the trees above, and Angela closed her eyes, imagining her brother's laughter carried in the breeze. She rose, brushing away tears, and walked back to her car with a heart lighter than it had ever been. What Angela didn't know yet was that the scholarship fund was about to explode into something much larger than a local program. Her family's story, broadcast in small articles and church bulletins, was about to reach national platforms, and with it, a wave of mercy and forgiveness that would touch thousands across the country. The story of her pain, her forgiveness, and Thomas's redemption was no longer just theirs. It was becoming a story for the world. Angela had always imagined her story would remain quiet, a personal journey of loss, forgiveness, and healing tucked away within her family and her community. But one morning in early 2025, that illusion shattered. Her phone buzzed with messages before she even left for work. Friends from church, colleagues at the hospital, even distant relatives she hadn't spoken to in years, all sending her the same link. A national news outlet had run a feature, "Forgiveness After Tragedy. A nurse saves the man who killed her brother." Angela sat at her kitchen table, staring at the headline. Her hands shook as she clicked. The article told their story: Michael's death, Thomas's guilt, her role as his nurse, and the scholarship born from it all. Photos of the scholarship recipients were included, smiling, holding certificates in Michael's name. She read every word, with a strange mix of fear and awe. Their private pain was no longer private. At the hospital, colleagues approached her with tears in their eyes. "Angela, I had no idea," one whispered. "Your strength, "It's inspiring." Another said, "That article, it's what this world needs. Proof that forgiveness is real." But not all the responses were kind. Online comments buzzed with debates. Some praised her mercy, while others questioned if Thomas deserved redemption at all. Angela tried not to read too much, but she couldn't avoid the sting of strangers dissecting her family's pain. That evening, she sat with her parents by the fire. Her mother clutched the article in her hands, her voice trembling. "It's everywhere, Angela. Do you think this is what God wanted?" Angela nodded slowly. Maybe. Maybe our story isn't just for us anymore. Maybe it's for anyone who's drowning in hate, who doesn't know there's another way." Her father, who had once resisted forgiveness so fiercely, spoke quietly. "If even one person finds peace because of this, then maybe Michael's death wasn't wasted." Within weeks, the story spread further. National television networks invited Angela for interviews. Churches across the country shared the testimony during services. Social media posts tagged the scholarship fund, urging donations. Angela was overwhelmed. She had never sought attention, she had only sought healing. Yet now her voice carried farther than she had ever imagined. On a Sunday morning, she found herself standing before a congregation in Chicago, telling her story. The room was packed, hundreds leaning in as she described the night of Michael's death, the years of bitterness, and the moment she chose to forgive. Her voice broke as she said, "I didn't forgive because it was easy. I forgave because hate was killing me more than grief ever could. And I saw that God had given me a chance to show mercy to the very man I swore I never would. That mercy changed us both." The sanctuary was silent, many wiping tears. When she finished, the pastor stepped forward, his own eyes wet. "Friends," he said, "this is what the gospel looks like in flesh and blood. Not just words, but living forgiveness." Angela walked off the stage, trembling, overwhelmed by the weight of it all. She had never seen herself as a preacher or speaker, but here she was, her story turning into a message of hope for strangers across the nation. Back home, the scholarship fund exploded with new life. Donations poured in from coast to coast. Universities requested to partner with it. By mid-2025, what began as Thomas's small gesture had become a national foundation, awarding dozens of scholarships annually under Michael's name. One letter struck Angela especially deeply. It came from a man in Texas who had lost his daughter in a drunk driving crash. "I read your story. I thought I'd never forgive the man who killed my child. But because of you, I went to the prison. I looked him in the eye, and for the first time, I felt free. Thank you." Angela pressed the letter to her chest, tears streaming. The ripple was real. What had started in one hospital room was now touching families across the nation. Yet, with all the attention, Angela struggled too. One evening, she sat alone by the fire, whispering a prayer. "Lord, I never wanted fame. I only wanted healing. Please don't let me lose sight of you in all this." In the stillness, she felt the same quiet assurance she had felt the night she first prayed for strength. God was still 3 steps ahead. Her parents joined her later, her father holding another clipping of Michael's photo in the paper. "Angela," he said softly, "I used to think your brother's story ended that night. But now I see it's still being written. And maybe it always will be." Angela smiled through her tears. "Yes, Dad. And every page is mercy." What Angela didn't realize yet was that the story was not just national. It was on the cusp of becoming global. And with it, a new chapter of healing and responsibility awaited her. Angela had barely adjusted to the national spotlight when the story leapt oceans. A Christian radio program in London picked it up, then a newspaper in Sydney. And within weeks, her inbox was flooded with messages from people across the globe. The subject line was almost always the same. "Your story gave me hope." She sat at her kitchen table late at night, scrolling through emails. A mother in Kenya wrote that she had forgiven the man who robbed her family after hearing about Angela's journey. A priest in Ireland said he preached about Michael's scholarship as proof that God still turns ashes into beauty. A teenager from the Philippines admitted that he had planned revenge against someone who hurt his sister, but changed his mind after reading Angela's words. Angela pressed her hand over her mouth, overwhelmed. She whispered, "Lord, I'm just one woman." How is all of this happening? Her parents were stunned too. One Sunday afternoon, Angela's father held up a stack of letters mailed from countries he could hardly pronounce. "Your brother's name," he said slowly, "is on the lips of people halfway across the world. I thought the world had forgotten him. But God made sure no one could." The scholarship fund now had an international board, donations coming not only from America but from Europe, Asia, even the Middle East. Angela found herself attending conferences she never imagined, speaking not as a nurse but as a voice for forgiveness. Yet with every invitation, she wrestled with fear. What if people saw her as some saint, when in truth she had fought bitterness for years? What if they misunderstood? One night before a conference in Toronto, Angela sat in her hotel room, trembling. "God," she prayed, "I can't carry this on my own. Don't let them see me. Let them see you." The next morning, as she stood before thousands, she shared her story again. But this time, she added something she had rarely admitted publicly. "I didn't forgive Thomas in one moment," she confessed. "I wrestled. I wept. I wanted to walk away. Forgiveness is not a switch you flip. It's a journey you walk. And every step God gave me just enough strength for that day. That's how I'm standing here." The audience was silent, then erupted in applause. Not because she sounded perfect, but because she sounded human. Back home, Angela often returned to Michael's grave. She would sit in the quiet, telling him about the lives being changed in his name. "Michael," she whispered once, "your story is in classrooms in South Africa. It's in pulpits in Canada. It's in the heart of a father in Brazil who forgave his son's killer. Can you believe that? Your name crossed oceans. The wind rustled the trees, and she felt that familiar peace, like heaven nodding in approval." One evening, as Angela was leaving the hospital, she was approached by a young man she didn't recognize. His eyes were red, his hands shaking. "Are you Nurse Reynolds?" he asked. "Yes," she said cautiously. "I read about your brother, about Thomas. My dad's in prison for drunk driving. He killed someone too. I've hated him for years. But your story," his voice cracked, "it made me think maybe I should visit him. Maybe I should tell him I forgive him before it's too late." Angela felt tears sting her eyes. She placed a hand on his shoulder. "Do it. Not just for him, do it for yourself. Don't let hate be your inheritance. Choose mercy." The boy nodded, tears streaming down his cheeks. As he walked away, Angela realized that this was what it was all about. Not the headlines, not the conferences, but one heart at a time, freed from chains. Her parents, once prisoners of grief, now joined her in these moments. They attended scholarship ceremonies, hugged recipients, and told their story with trembling voices. Angela's father, who had once sworn never to forgive, now said quietly to a group of students, "Don't let anger steal your life the way it nearly stole mine." Angela watched him, her heart swelling. If forgiveness could transform even her father, it could transform anyone. By the close of 2025, the scholarship had funded students in 5 countries. What began as one act of mercy in a hospital room had grown into a movement. Angela knew she hadn't planned any of this. She had only taken one trembling step at a time. But step by step, God had turned her tragedy into a testimony that now circled the globe. And yet, deep inside, she knew the story wasn't finished. Because mercy doesn't end with one generation, it flows on, like a fire passed from hand to hand. Angela sat by her fireplace one December evening, her parents beside her. Letters from around the world spread across the table. The flames danced, warm and steady. She whispered into the glow, "Lord, thank you. Thank you for reminding me that the darkest night can still end in dawn." And somewhere beyond the firelight, in a way she couldn't explain, she felt Michael's laughter in the air, like a final seal on a story only God could have written. The year drew to a close with snow falling gently across Indianapolis. Angela sat by the fireplace with her parents, the crackle of the flames warming the room as they sifted through another pile of letters from scholarship students around the world. Each envelope carried a different hand, a different story, but the same message. Michael's name lives on, and mercy has changed me. Her father, once so hardened, held one letter in his trembling hands. He read it aloud, his voice thick with emotion. Because of Michael Reynolds, I am the first in my family to study medicine. Because of Angela's choice to forgive, I believe my future is more than my past. Because of Thomas, I know even broken people can be used by God. He set the paper down, his eyes wet. Angela, he whispered, for the first time in 25 years, I don't feel anger when I say Michael's name. I feel proud. Proud of him. Proud of you. And thankful that God didn't let hate write the last chapter. Angela reached for his hand, her mother's hand joining theirs. The three of them sat in silence, bound not by grief anymore, but by grace. That night, as Angela lay in bed, she thought back to the beginning, to the night of flashing sirens and broken glass, to the vow she had whispered, "I'll never forgive him." She had believed those words were permanent, carved into stone, and yet here she was, decades later, living proof that even the hardest vow can be undone by God's mercy. She remembered her first sight of Thomas in that hospital bed, the rage that surged, the prayer she whispered through clenched teeth, "Lord, help me." She hadn't known then what that prayer would unleash. She hadn't known forgiveness would become a fire that burned away bitterness, a river that carried her family out of the desert of grief. And now, looking at Michael's photo on her nightstand, she whispered, "We made it, little brother. We carried you forward, and your name is healing people you never met." Months later, Angela was invited to speak at a global conference on forgiveness and reconciliation. As she stood on stage before thousands, her voice carried calm strength. "I'm not here because I'm special," she said. "I'm here because I was broken. I lost my brother. I hated the man who took him from us. But God placed me in a position where I had to choose, to heal him or to let him die. And in choosing to heal, I discovered that forgiveness was healing me too. Forgiveness doesn't erase pain, doesn't excuse what was done, but it transforms the story. And sometimes God uses the very thing we thought would destroy us to become the testimony that saves others." The audience was silent, tears glistening across faces from many nations. Angela ended with the same question she often posed in her own heart. What would you do if God placed in your hands the very person who hurt you most? Would you let hate decide or mercy? Back home, the fire in her living room glowed once more as she ended the day in quiet reflection. Her parents sat beside her, the air warm with peace. "Angela," her mother whispered, "this home feels alive again." Angela smiled softly. "It's not because the pain is gone. It's because mercy moved in." She leaned back, letting the fire's warmth seep into her bones. She thought of Thomas, his broken voice, his trembling hands, his final act of honor. She thought of Michael, his laughter, his dreams cut short, and the legacy now growing brighter with each passing year. She thought of God, who had woven their shattered lives into a tapestry of redemption. For the first time in decades, Angela felt whole. Conclusion for the Fireside audience. And so, dear listener, what began as a story of loss and bitterness became one of mercy and healing. Angela's choice to forgive didn't just save Thomas. It saved herself, her parents, and countless others touched by Michael's legacy. It leaves us with questions worth carrying tonight. Would you have the strength to forgive if God placed your enemy in your care? Do we recognize that sometimes forgiveness isn't about the other person at all, but about freeing our own hearts? And when tragedy strikes, can we trust that God might already be writing a greater ending? Good evening, my friend, and thank you for being part of our little fireside circle tonight. If the story touched your heart, share it to the ones you love, and if you would like to listen to more like it, you know where to find us.